What's up, everyone, and welcome to the first review on the Entertainment Room. I just want to start off by saying that if you're listening, then I'm thrilled to have you join me. Podcasting is something that I've wanted to try for a very long time now, and I'm incredibly excited to get this thing up and running. Before I start my first review, I just want to say that I'm in no way trying to make myself out to be some kind of expert on film, nothing like that. I'm just here to have a fucking good time, and hope you guys do the same listening. So for my first review, I am reviewing Last Shift, the 2014 film directed by Anthony DiBlasi, who recently released the reimagined film with the same plot line, which was Malum. It does not seem to be doing super well overall, but I do want to see it still, and I still kind of want to watch it and see how it compares to this one and try and get in his head and see what the goal was and kind of doing, I don't know if you call it a reboot, but whatever the case. But I've not seen it show up on any streaming services so far that won't charge me extra, and I am not really willing to pay extra for that right now. So I'm kind of waiting on that still. So a little background on me. I'm a huge horror fan. Have been since I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I'm pretty well rounded with what I like in the genre. And I don't have to have like an art house film or a film super thought-provoking to give it a good score. I honestly have an abundance of guilty pleasures in this genre, as you'll definitely see as the channel goes on, and I can't wait to cover those as the channel progresses. I just want something that's interesting and puts decent effort into its scares, and preferably in most cases some into its characters as well, to make it have that lasting impact. But with Last Shift, we have rookie police officer Jessica Lauren, played by Juliana Harkavy, who is known for roles in The Flash, Arrow, and DC's Legends of Tomorrow. I don't really keep up with those shows, but I believe she is Black Canary, from my understanding. And basically she's starting her first shift at the last night of a soon-to-be abandoned police station. Her role is to handle any walk-ins that may show up, and basically make sure things don't go to shit, basically, at the station's final night. All emergency calls are supposed to be rerouted to the new station, and after an uncomfortable exchange with Sergeant Cohen, who is the epitome of "I'm getting too old for this shit," Officer Lauren is on her own in the eerily quiet halls of the building. Hell, to me, as a definite introvert, this sounds like a job from heaven, at least in the first 5 minutes of the film. But one thing I love since the beginning is the really ominous score that plays throughout. It was incredibly effective at creating a sense of dread as our lead character quickly becomes aware of how fucked up this shift is going to be. And a normally repetitive mistake a lot of horror films make is that they have this huge, blaring, and obnoxious score that intensifies until it cuts suddenly, like a literal second before a jump scare occurs. It's a cheap tactic, honestly, and it can easily take you out of the experience. This is an issue I don't feel like this film really struggles with most of the time. It does have some fairly cheap jump scares, especially towards the finale of the film, but it does a decent job utilizing its sound with its suspenseful scenes for the most part. And while I do appreciate that Last Shift utilizes jump scares pretty well most of the time, what really works even more so for me is just the suspense that builds throughout. Pretty much as soon as Officer Lauren is left alone, she really doesn't ever get much room to breathe. One intense moment almost always leads into another without much rest. So the pacing to me is great here. And this next thing isn't a spoiler really, especially if you look at any of the main movie posters, but supernatural forces are the main things at play here, making it rather tough for her to find a way to receive any kind of support for her nightmarish evening. And speaking on our lead, Juliana Harkavy gives one hell of a performance. I really didn't expect much from this film in general when I watched it for the first time, but to me she nails every emotion she needs to hit. To be the only actor on screen for a good portion of the film, you really need to be a strong and convincing performer in order to hold the audience's attention and carry the movie along. This role did require quite the range from her, and I personally feel like she was a great choice. As you start to unveil more about her character as the plot progresses, it's easy to feel for her character, as you do understand why she's trying so hard to handle her situation, without being so quick to panic, and to leave her shit show of shift behind. The direction is fantastic as well, as many creative scares are pulled off, and while this isn't the most inventive or original plot, there were several scenes I enjoyed watching on my second viewing before recording this, And I won't spoil any of them, but there is one scene involving a dark room with absolutely no lighting whatsoever. All you get are voices and the room's natural sound, as the character is trapped and unsure of what is going on around her, with no indication of when the lights will come back on. It was just a really nice way to instill a sense of helplessness. But overall, I would say I'm a fan of Last Shift. It's nowhere near the scariest film you'll see, but it is unsettling with some very effective scares. The plot does well at keeping you invested. I appreciate when a horror film utilizes one isolated location, also combined with it taking place at night. Night shift films are huge for me, and I was really rooting for this film. I don't have too many complaints overall, besides some cheap jump scares, especially in the third act. And the makeup was simple, but I feel like overall it was effective, and it was done really well. There was one makeup choice that really didn't work for me. It felt almost hilariously different and cheaper than the other effects, even for the low budget films of the time and the other low budget aspects of this film. It just really threw me off. It almost took me out of the last third act. Not completely, but just enough that still kind of stuck in my mind. There's also a scene that seems to pay homage to one famous one in Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm not sure if they're going for that, or that's just a weird connection I'm making in my head. But I was worried at first that it was going to be too similar to how the first Nightmare on Elm Street film looked. And it did seem like they were going to put a nice twist on it, but ultimately the moment felt flat, despite them taking a different twist on it. And the last thing I'll mention was an unfortunately funny scene where Officer Lauren calls out, asking other officers to come out and stop fucking with her. And I can understand her logic on some earlier scenes, but the scene that kind of ticked her off was a trick that no human on fucking Earth could have possibly pulled off in the amount of time that they were given. I guess you could attribute that to her declining mental state, but it still kind of made me laugh more than it should have. Just the timing of the moment. Back fondly on my viewing experience, so I'm going to give Last Shift an 8 out of 10, and this may seem generous to many, as I see the film only got about a 5.8 out of 10 on IMDb, but I honestly feel like that is way too low for what we get, especially compared to other movies with a similar score. But either way, at the end of the day, this is just my opinion. My goal is, of course, to entertain, but also to give people who haven't seen a film good insight as to whether they may be interested in giving it a chance or not. But I hope you guys will enjoy today's review. I do hope to get more confident, more creative in my craft as I put this podcast together. I think in most videos, I will kind of, I think I'll give a little background, a little plot points at first, and then I'll get into some spoilers, and I'll of course warn you guys before I do that, in case you have not seen the movie or want to see it again before hearing my review. But I just want to thank you guys so much, whoever's coming to listen. I am looking forward to growing this channel and growing my confidence and giving you guys more and more to come back to. But for today, guys, that is all. Thanks so much again for listening, and I'll see you again next time on the Entertainment Room.